Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second unofficial episode of the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon podcast. My name is Michael, and I'm excited to talk about some fights. And in front of us, there's a UFC 218, and what we're going to talk about, I guess I should give you a preview. Two fights that I want to talk about: the main event and the co-main event, which is Cris Cyborg Justino versus Holm, and Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Edson Barboza. So let's start with the main event: Cris Cyborg Justino versus Holm. Both fighters are probably facing the best fighter they ever fought. Cyborg just won the vacated 145-pound title, and Holm broke her 3-fight losing streak with a win over Betch Correia. And now those two ladies will fight each other at UFC 219. How I want to approach this podcast, or this breakdown rather, is from the outside in. Since the fight was announced, a lot of people were saying a lot of different things, trying to see how those two fighters match up against each other. So, on paper, this fight looks good for Holly. An outside fighter who can stay away from the pressure and score on the outside with kicks. But then, when you include the skill set of Cyborg, then, well, it doesn't look great for Holly. And people have been saying that Cyborg will chase Holly just like Ronda did. I think Misha Tate said that Holly has a good chance of winning this because Cyborg follows her opponents like a missile. But that's not exactly true. Cyborg pressures, but doesn't bull rush like Ronda did against Holly. So let's talk about their styles. Some people say that Holly is a counterpuncher, but that's not true either. She does her best job on the counter when her opponents recklessly charge at her, read Ronda Rousey. What a counterpuncher wants to do, well, a counterpuncher, for example, is somebody like Anderson Silva or Holly's previous opponent Valentina Shevchenko. And what a counter striker wants to do is to counter. They are not going to lead. If they are really a counter striker, they want to counter and counter only. They will wait and look for the opponent to attack, at best to overextend so that they can counter that, and if their opponent is not willing to lead, just like Patrick Cote and Damian Maia did with Anderson Silva, those fights don't look exciting. The same happened when Valentina Shevchenko fought Amanda Nunes. Nunes didn't open up, so they just stared at each other for 25 minutes. Holly is an outside fighter. She wants to be circling on the outside, setting up her kicks with blitzing hand combinations. That's what she wants to do. Cris Cyborg, on the other hand, is a stylistically interesting fighter. She's a pressure fighter, but she's also a counterpuncher. So what do you get out of that combination? An aggressive counterpuncher. Very similar to young Mike Tyson or her now retired UFC colleague Anthony Jensen. Fighters with styles like that are going to move forward, but their priority is to counter. They're not going to overextend, and they're not going to lead and do anything stupid, or they're not going to open up stupidly and make a silly mistake. Well, and the interesting part of that style is the fact that the offense is it works with the defense as well, because when you slip a punch, you can just stand up and do this right now. You can stay in your stance, and let's say you slip in the right hand to the outside when you're in orthodox stance. You slip it, and basically that loads your hip so that you can fire a left hook. Both Mike Tyson and Anthony Johnson and Cris Cyborg actually do that pretty well. They move their head pretty well, and that loads their hip so that they can fire back. So Cyborg, she's going to move forward, but instead of leading all the time, she wants to draw out a response and counter that. If you watch her UFC debut against Leslie Smith, every combination Cyborg thrown was on the counter. So some people say that because of Cyborg's pressure, Holly will be able to stay on the outside and stay away from pressure, but just like she did against Ronda Rousey. But unlike Rousey, Cyborg has actual tools to pressure her opponents towards the cage. She uses her jab, she uses her really good footwork to cut off the space, and her right kick is actually very good too, and she uses it when her opponents want to circle out into her right, and when she takes the ability to move away from their opponents, and when their back hits the cage, she unloads powerful combinations. And Cyborg will want to take away Holly's movement and push her towards the fence, but she's not going to do the same thing Ronda did, because Ronda Rousey isn't even close to the depth of skill that Cyborg has. Cyborg will pressure, but she's not going to do anything stupid. She's going to use her jab, good footwork and leg kicks, maybe even the body kick, because it's an open guard matchup. Holly's a southpaw. She's going to use those weapons to pressure her effectively, not bull rush, just like Ronda did. I'm saying that like 5 times already. In the past, Cyborg was just a physical force of nature. She was primarily using her size and strength to basically bully her opponents. A fight that comes to mind is her fight with Gina Carano. Now, Cyborg has developed a serious depth of skill, courtesy to her coach and the coach of Michael Bisping also. And that depth of skill that Cyborg has developed, I don't think many opponents can compete with that against her. A good observation on how Holly can win this fight is Cyborg's fight with Jorina Bars. It was a Muay Thai fight, and Jorina did a good job of stopping Cyborg's forward movement with nice jabs, with nicely timed jabs and front kicks. She was even able to stun Cyborg at one point of the fight. It's important to mention that it was a Muay Thai fight, not an MMA fight, and there is a difference. And can Holm do that to Cyborg? I don't know, or I don't even think so. If we look at Jason Perillo, stylistically boxing point of view, Holly's a boxer, and Cyborg would be the pressure fighter. And usually the pressure fighters beat boxers. A style that beats pressure fighters is a boxer puncher. They have the skill and the movement of a boxer, but they also have the ability to punch with the pressure fighter, to scare them away, or at least to make them question their decisions. And I don't think that Holly has either the power in her hands or the confidence in her hands to stand her ground and exchange with Cyborg in order to scare her away. Also, an important layer to this fight is the pace that both fighters work at. Because some people have been saying that Holly has to take Cyborg into the deep waters and, stretch out the fight and take her to the later rounds and make her tired, make her punch herself out. So let's talk about the numbers. Cyborg in her last fight threw 144 strikes in 12 rounds. That's exactly 12 strikes a minute. And she landed a half of that. That's 74, 75 significant strikes landed. That's an insane pace. And Cyborg wasn't even breathing heavy after that. So I don't think there's a cardio issue there. In 2013, which is not a lot in fighters' years, Cyborg went 4 rounds in Invicta, and she looked actually good, not tired. So there's no actual evidence of cardio problems on. Her coaches say that she actually runs 6 miles a day. That's fucking a lot. That's a lot. That's a really good cardio regimen. She's an athlete. And Holly Holm in her last fight threw 54 total strikes in 11 minutes. That's almost the same amount of time and a third of Cyborg's output. Holly was really timid in her last fight with Correa. Even the referee, Mark Goddard, who's a good referee and doesn't make a lot of mistakes, he had to warn both fighters for timidity. And in the Randomine fight, Holly threw 180 strikes in 25 minutes. That's Cyborg's output on Cyborg Sport. And the authority of those strikes is very different, way more powerful on the Cyborg's part. So I don't know why some people have been saying that Holly can tire out Cyborg and win a decision if Cyborg throws more volume than her. And most of those strikes by Holly are kicks. And it's harder to score with kicks to the leg and to the body than it is with punches. That was the case in the Randomine fight. Holly was throwing and landing more kicks, but the Randomine was landing more significant punches to the head. Some people were even saying that it's enough to win the decision. I think Brendan Schaub was saying that Holly won on volume, but you can't say that without considering the authority and the weight of the strikes. So let's say if we fight and I kicked you in the leg 20 times and you punched me square in the face and make my head snap back. Are you saying I'm winning? Come on, man. You can say that. You can't just say that. Of course, there's a chance of that Holly wins this fight. It's MMA and everything and anything can happen. But in order for Holly to win this fight, she would have to fight a perfect fight. Literally, a perfect fight. She kind of did that against Ronda, at least strategically, but she still got touched up. Ronda was still able to connect with some good punches, and she's not even close to Cyborg skill-wise. Some people on the forums were saying that, mentioning that the Jackson Winklejohn Academy is good at game planning against fighters like Cyborg, and that person used an example of Carlos Condit and Nick Diaz, but Diaz is a swarmer without the footwork to pressure effectively, and Cyborg has both the footwork and the cardio to do it for 5 rounds if she has to. It's interesting to mention that, and that was brought up to me by a fan post on bloodyelbow.com by a guy of Twitter handle, let me just check for that, MMA, BJJ, and Life. So, I don't know, you can thank him for that on Twitter. That person posted that the Jackson Winklejohn Academy lost 17 fights in a row in the UFC. Now, that's interesting. It doesn't mean that they are a bad MMA camp or that they are declining. It might be that just a lot of fighters or a lot of fights are matchup dependent. Anyway, it's interesting to notice that when people say things like good game planning will affect this fight, well, just look what happened, 17 times in a row. So anyway, what I expect Cyborg to do is to pressure technically with a calm demeanor. She will flick her jab. Well, she will land it too, because it's a weapon also. She will kick the leg. She will make Holly throw back, because I don't think that Holly can get away. Her movement is good, but her footwork, I think, will be neutralized by Cyborg's footwork. When a fighter is pressuring another fighter, for every step that the pressure fighter makes, the fighter that wants to get away has to take a step and a half. So they are doing more work when they are fighting on the back foot. Holly would have to pivot and sidestep out of range, taking only 2 steps. If she doesn't have to, take 3, just like Jose Aldo does. That's an example of efficient footwork. Holly doesn't do that. She usually just gets the fuck out of there and circles out. That's why I think Cyborg will have an advantage using her footwork, because she actually pivots both on the lead foot and on the back foot. And when you pivot on the back foot, it's used to keep you in front of your opponent when you're pressuring them. She sidesteps and she takes angles, she takes small steps so that she can adjust and defend before it's too late. She's not gonna bounce back and forth like you guys remember Martin Kampen did, and when he got KO'd by Johnny Hendricks. Her footwork is legit, and I think that this fight will look something like the Randamin fight, but with more volume on Cyborg's part and way more violent. So what the Randamin did when in that fight with Holly is actually by pressuring Holly, and when she bullets in with her combinations, predictable right left combination is countered. And that's not exactly the style that the Randamin fights with. And she still had success pressuring Holly. Holly did a good job of clinching with the Randamin. She actually uses the clinch as a safety blanket. That's within her style. She had success in the clinch in that fight and in her fight with Valentina Shevchenko. Even though that Shevchenko was the more skillful fighter in the clinch, Holly was just bigger and stronger. That's how she uses her clinch. She's more physical than technical. Just because she's usually the bigger fighter. But here with Cyborg, I don't think she can match her in both skill and physicality. To be honest, I don't think Holly can match her in any phase of the fight. Holly will also give up something like 10 or 15 pounds of weight to Cyborg. So in the clinch, skill-wise and strength-wise, Cyborg is better. And on the ground, again, Cyborg's stronger, and her grappling is actually underrated. She took something like, I think, a 3rd place at the ADCC in 2009 or 10, and she won the IBJJF World titles both in 2011 and 2012. So she's actually skilled on the ground, and on the feet the depth of skill is there too. And stylistically, it's a bad matchup for Holly. So I think, and this is my prediction, that Cyborg wins by knockout in the third or 4th round. I think it might take her something like 2 or 3 minutes to figure out Holly's movement and to basically figure out that Holly has not much to offer to her on the feet. Cyborg then will go to work, and I think she will finish it before the 25-minute mark. But hey, anything can happen, right? Holly can win, but that would actually surprise me. Anyway, that's my read on the fight. Cyborg by 3rd or 4th round knockout. I think that Cyborg is just the greatest female fighter ever, and I really don't see anybody beating her for a long time in MMA. Really, there's not a lot of contenders. Even like the idea of the fact that she's fighting Holly, who's not naturally a featherweight. I mean, I think she fought in boxing like at 147 pounds. But come on, she's not a featherweight. She's a bantamweight. She's a 135 pounder. A pretty big one, but like if you look at her last 4 fights, and then she had that fight with Correa, which wasn't super exciting and wasn't actually a lot of happening, or Holly wasn't having a lot of success until she landed that kick. So, and she was very timid. So after her losing 3 fights and then being timid and not doing great in her last fight, despite of winning, you look at Cyborg and you tell her, hey, go fight that Brazilian chick who's just murdering people in the cage. Like, really? Man. But anyway, that's my breakdown on this fight. Prediction is Cyborg by knockout, third or fourth round. And now on to our second fight, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Edson Barboza. And I'm just going to leave all the controversy with Khabib missing weight last time he was supposed to fight, because yeah, I'm just not interested in that. I'm interested in the fight. So let's talk about that. Edson is an interesting fighter because he's an outside fighter, but there's something, I guess, unusual about his outside fighting style, because usually an outside fighter, they want to be in the longer range. In Edson's case, it's something between the kicking range and the fringes of the pocket. But that's not the only range that outside fighters utilize. They want to be either all the way out or all the way in. And that's the way they use the clinch. When their opponent is advancing on them, they can just close the distance themselves. And when they enter the clinch, it's on their own terms. They are in control of the position. They can choose the underhooks and the overhooks, just like Overeem did to Mark Hunt. Or it's kind of a similar. It's also a similar way that Holm uses her clinch as a safety blanket. But Edson Barboza does not want to be close to his opponents. He's the kind of an outside fighter that prefers to be all the way out at all times. He doesn't want to be close. In the Dariush fight, every time Dariush clinched with Edson, Edson just wanted to get away, even if he was in a favorable position. And if you guys remember the Michael Johnson fight, Johnson pressured him like crazy, and he actually won a decision. So it's pretty safe to say that Edson doesn't like pressure. Another example of a fighter who pressured him was his fight with Tony Ferguson. That was just a crazy fight, insane pace, and just the pressure of Ferguson was too much for Edson. But now he's actually a better fighter, and he has some answers for that pressure, and that are his counters in the pocket. And you can see those counters in the El Cucuy fight. His eyes look better too than they used to be a couple years ago. When you say that somebody has good eyes, it means that they see stuff coming. And the skill set came along for Edson very well also. He knows what he wants to do, and he knows how to get it done. People were saying that he will have some problems with Anthony Pettis just because it will be contested on the feet, and Edson will probably not pressure Pettis just like other fighters did. But he didn't have to. He got the job done in the middle of the cage, in the range that he was comfortable at. In his fight with Benil Dariush, Dariush did a very good job of not letting Edson set his feet, which is a thing you have to do if you want to attack. You can't punch when your feet aren't under it. I mean, you still can, but what good are they if your feet aren't under it? So Dariush made sure that Edson didn't reset effectively. Every time he tried or he had something going against Dariush, Dariush stopped him in his tracks. He pressured well, which is a thing you're going to do to Edson since he doesn't like pressure. Another thing Dariush did is to answer, to punch last. Every time Edson had something going on, when he landed a combination or landed in an exchange, Dariush made sure to be the last man punching. In that way, he didn't let Edson have the last word and didn't let him get away with any free shots. He still got countered though, but he made sure not to let Edson counter to be the last punch. He had to answer it, and he was able to do it for 8.5 minutes until Edson landed that knee. And I mean, that's just what kind of an athlete he is, and that's how good of an eye he has. So let's talk about Khabib now. Striking isn't what he does best. He's a wrestler, and he actually uses his striking to get his wrestling going. On the feet, his uppercuts and hooks set up his takedowns, and when he gets on his opponent's hips, they go for a ride. He's a very good chain wrestler, and he's always a step or two ahead of his opponents. He can enter a double leg, and before his opponent reacts, he knows how they are going to defend it, so he can switch it to another takedown, like a single leg, and from that he can go to a high crotch takedown, or he can run the pipe on the single leg. I mean, he's so good in that phase of the fight, and when he takes his opponents to the ground, you can assume that the round or even the fight is over. On the ground, he's also always 1 or 2 steps ahead of his opponents. He will let them move, knowing what they're going to do, so he's kind of a pressure grappler, not in the way of squishing his opponents into the canvas, but being on them all the time and not letting them escape, but at the same time giving them a false sense of being capable of escaping. So he's kind of like a wet blanket on you. You can still move, but fuck, how good is that if you can't escape? On the feet, he seems like he struggles with range, at least in the early on, and opponents like Michael Johnson has had some success against him because of the distance. So when the fight starts, he usually stays in the open and tries to figure out the distance. He doesn't kick that much, and he doesn't jab that much either. So he makes it up for that with his aggressiveness and forward movement and good footwork to pressure his opponents and get into the range where he wants to be at. Khabib actually moves his head well when he pressures, so it's not that easy to hit him clean. And he does like to pressure. He's actually quite aggressive on the feet. He's going to come forward. He wants to get close so that he can get into the clinch or that he can shoot a takedown. So let's talk about how they match up together. This is kind of a classical striker versus grappler matchup, which makes it an interesting fight because of the fact that the striker, Barboza, stylistically an outside striker, an outside fighter, doesn't want to be at the close range, and Khabib excels at the close range. So it's not even a style difference as much as grappler striker goes, but also a range difference because when Khabib gets onto his opponent's hips, they go for a ride. So Barboza can't let him get close enough to be able to shoot. His preferred range is something like between the kicking range and the fringes of the pocket, where when his opponents get too close, he has weapons there too, and that are his counters, which are really, really good. So, how this fight might look like. For Khabib, I expect to pressure for 2 reasons. One, it's because that's what he wants to do, and it's how he gets into the clinch or into the ground by using his wrestling. He needs to be close. And the second reason is because Edson doesn't like pressure. And because Edson is a very good striker and he knows what he wants to do, I think it might take Khabib like 2, 3, maybe even a round to figure out the distance. And the real question here is, can Edson stay away from Khabib and keep it on the feet? Because that's how he wins this. If he can stay on the feet, he's going to punish Khabib for advancing. He will kick his legs, he will kick his body, he will connect with body head combinations, and I can see him getting, in that way, a clean 30-27 decision. I could see that happening. But if he can't keep Khabib off of him, and if Khabib gets this to the ground, then Edson is in trouble, in real trouble. And I think that Khabib could even finish the fight on the ground. He prefers position over submission, and that complements his ground and pound, which is so fucking scary. The punches that he was landing on Michael Johnson were just insane. He goes to town with those. I mean, his ground and pound isn't even comparable with anyone else's. I mean, maybe John Jones with his elbows. So impressive, man. I think I actually should give a shout out to another guy who kind of fights like him, and that's Alexander Volkanovski, whose ground and pound looks quite similar, or whose wrestling looks quite similar. So the question is, at what distance this fight will take place? If Edson can keep this at the distance that he wants to fight at, I say that he takes a clean decision. But if Khabib can move forward and get close and get on Edson's hips and take him down, he can finish the fight, either with a ground and pound, or he might even transition to the back and take the choke. That's how I see this fight going. And I guess I'm gonna get bold and give you guys a prediction. So I pick Khabib. I say he gets done inside the distance, late TKO on the ground. So I guess that's my pick. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please subscribe to the channel and stay tuned, because I'm probably going to do a recap show after the event talking about more fights than just those two. After the event, I'll probably cover more than just two fights. So stay tuned, and thank you one more time for listening.